Hi there. In this video series, we've covered a lot of ground so far. We started with basically nothing. We managed to get React Native up and running. We imported some packages. We did a preliminary example with Redux and reducers. We took a look at the architectural overview of a Redux-based application. And finally, we hit a external web service. In this case, it was Spoonacular. And now we're getting data from the server. We're able to take a look at that data in our state. And the next step is going to be rendering this information to the page and doing a bit of styling work. So we're going to be styling our React Native application, and eventually, we're kind of nearing the end of this tutorial series. We're going to also look at how we can handle input from the user. So let's get started. If you might remember, we have our recipe reducer, we have our home container, we have our app container, and we have our index.ios.js file. So we started with the index.ios.js file, where we essentially configured Redux, and we created a provider component with an app container component. Inside the app container, we have just a few lines of code for taking all the action creators, all the actions that are available in our application, and exposing them to any container components down the line. Now, in this very simple example, we just have one container component, and it's the home component. So the majority of our work today is going to be in this home component. Let's take a look at our home.js file. Our home.js file right now is connected to Redux and is only listening for the searched recipes. And before we were looking at the recipe count, but for the purposes of this, we're just going to be working with the searched recipes. So I have a button here. I hit searched pressed, and then I automatically fetch my recipes, and I say give me all my recipes that include bacon, cucumber, and banana. And then the API is going to do that, and then it's going to set values in my reducer, change the state of my application, and then Redux will expose the new state as props to my component. The next step is to be able to render that, which is the fun part. So I've pressed search. I'm just going to create a function here, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, this could be characterized as an enhancer, but I'm not quite sure on that definition or that terminology. But effectively, we need to take our data from the state, from our reducer, and we need to transform it into something that's easy to work with in our view. In this case, I'm just going to take the hash map and extract the values. And the way to do that in a one-liner in ES6 is to do object.keys, this.props.searched recipes. So we're going to get the keys, and then we're just going to do a map over that, and we're going to take the key and then look for this.props.searched recipes and pop the key into the hash map, which will result in us getting an array. If you don't believe me, we can just do a console.log in the render, and you can see when I invoke recipes, the render method, of course, will run whenever there's a change. And if I do, so the first time it's empty, if I do fetch recipes, we're going to see there's our asynchronous request, there's our action, and then there is our array of values. So far, so good. Next step is, of course, rendering this to the view. Now, I've already gone in and I've defined a scroll view. The scroll view is a special component that allows us to scroll very naturally. And one of the sort of unfortunate side effects of working with a hybrid application or the kind of mobile web view is that oftentimes the scroll doesn't function the way you would expect on a mobile device. And because the scroll view is actually backed by a native Objective-C component, you won't have any of that jankiness, as long as you write performant code. So in this case, I'm just going to write a very simple map. So I'm going to say this.recipes.map, and the map is going to transform our data into a React component. So in this case, I'm going to transform the recipe into a view. I think I might need a return statement here. And then I'm going to have the image, which is going to have a source. And the URI is going to be recipe.image. Now, of course, you might want some validation if you were doing something a little more sophisticated. I'm just going to put an empty style tag in here. We're going to deal with that in just a moment. And the text, which is going to be the recipe.title. Refresh. Now when I fetch recipes, and it comes back from the server, this is great. Okay, so I'm starting to already get some data from the server, which is exciting. The pictures aren't coming through for a reason, but we'll deal with that in a moment. And I'm also getting a warning at the bottom saying each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key. And so this is a requirement when you're mapping or you're creating an array of values in React, is to specify a key. Of course, that's not a problem for us because we have the ID, which can be a unique value to help React know if it needs to re-render this thing or not. So we refresh again. Again, it's a very fast development experience because you're not recompiling the entire application every time. So that's good. The error's gone away. I can scroll, which is always very exciting. Now let's do a bit of styling work. So the first thing I want to do is I want to see those images. So let me just put 150 here. I'll just find a height. See what happens there. Okay. There we go. Now, it's not scrolling quite right. It's kind of scrolling a little bit and then dying, right? And that's because we haven't really done any styling work at all. We haven't gone in and defined a style sheet and explained to our view layer how we want this thing to render. Another nice thing about working with React and React Native is that we can actually use the Flexbox model for defining our style sheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to define these different sections of our component, of our home component. I'm going to say there's going to be styles.scene. That'll be kind of an external or a top-level component. And then I'm going to say style here, and this is going to be styles.search section, because that would make sense, because it's the search section. And then I think I'm going to probably want a style here, and it's going to be styles.search button. And the scroll view is definitely going to need to have a style associated with it. So it's going to be styles.scroll section. Now, of course, you could refactor this like any other code into a helper library or some kind of JavaScript file that has all of your styles if you notice there's duplication across components. And then the next thing is, I'm already using a style here, so I might as well refactor that. Styles dot, let's call this the result image. And style here is going to be styles.result text. And I think that's it. So now I'm going to look at a new component that we haven't discussed yet in this tutorial series, which is the style sheet component. Now, because we're dealing with just straight up JavaScript or ES6, it's relatively easy to describe what that data structure is going to look like. And actually, there's a pattern in React Native to use this style sheet class, or the style sheet object, or prototype, I should say, to create a style sheet. And this typically happens at the bottom of the component. And the reason for doing this is every time we render, we don't want to have to recalculate these values. And so React Native provides us this style sheet object or style sheet class to quickly and efficiently describe the styles of our components. So the best practice is basically just to use it. So we want to describe our scene. We want to describe our search section. And we want to describe our scroll section. My formatting is all off. It's driving me crazy. And our scene is going to have a flex of 1. This is basically describing the outer size. And we're going to have a margin top of 20. And this is going to make sure that we don't impede on the status bar. Our search section is going to have a height of 30 and a border bottom color of, let's say, black, and a border bottom width of 1. And let's just give it some padding as well. And then the scroll section, and this is important, the scroll section, let's say we'll have a flex of 0.8. So it's inside. And then I have a few other things that I described. I think I have a result image, which I have a height of 150. I think that's what I decided. And then I also had the result text. And here we will have a background color, again, of black, and a text color of white. Very exciting. And a height of 20. Refresh this again. Line 59. Oh, I forgot a comma. Refresh this again. OK. Press this button. And boom. This is starting to look like something, and it's scrolling properly. So far, so good. So the only thing that's missing now is the ability to capture user input. So in the next video, we're going to polish off this example. We're going to add our text input box. And we're also going to add a little more feedback to the user when the thing is searching. Thanks for listening.